Of Wars, Eastern Europe. Again, this was a review copy, one that I asked for, which is rarer and rarer these days. Usually, nowadays, people contact me and say, hey, we can do this. Not because I'm particularly famous or anything, more because I have inhibitions about approaching for something. But this one is about such an interesting topic and builds upon two games that I really, really have enjoyed in the past. So, it was like, well, I'm not going to buy it, like, not now, not with my finances the way they are, although fucking bought some GMT stuff. But, I want to explore, hey, what is the product of a new company like? Let's start off with the lead, which is that this is an underdeveloped game. It should have never been released in the condition that it's in. That said, there are some good things about it. First of all, the topic is fucking amazing. Amazing in the sense that I know of very, very few games that try to cover this period at all. And most, a couple of them are Euro type games, although I can't remember what the one is. Something of God. That I wanted to get my hands on. It's a Martin Wallace or something, but it's got some cute mechanisms in it. But, it doesn't try to portray the history in the same kind of detail as this does. And it's actually a later period as well. It's more about the dissolution of Poland than this period, which is, this is the high, or close to the high water mark of Poland and Lithuania. And may actually be the high water because of the union happening. All right, let's do the easy stuff first, the components. The components are actually really, really high quality. The box is, not your standard Wargaming Company box. It looks more like a print and play type, situation where it was constructed more easily. But it's fairly sturdy and serves its purpose just fine as far as I'm concerned. The board, again, when you see the back of the board, you're like, oh, is this a real copy? It is. I'll show you part of the board. It very, very much of the Here I Stand style and flavor. And, suits its purpose pretty well along those lines. The cards, the decks of cards are really high quality cards. They're like the GMT sort of too stiff cards, a little bit of a pain to shuffle, and you think they're going to be more durable. They may not actually be because of the stiffness, if the stiffness kind of breaks the problem. I've never had it happen, but I could see that being the case. I'm not sure I can get everything in the way I've got it packed. I guess I can. The counters look professional. Nice matte finish to them. And then there's these little wooden blocks for your standees, for the different leaders. Event chits that are a little hard to read. The typeface is a little small on the event chits for my aging eyes, but they work. You can get a bunch of them. You got a lot of control markers and whatnot. One of the things, and I'm not going to put this against the counters, but while I'm looking at the counters to talk about, one of the many things that's kind of not right with the rules is they don't really give a full description of what things are. So there's terms that are used in the rules like hussars, which don't aren't actually. You're not given an example to see what that picture should look like. There's some of the different nationalities. It's hard to find where they are. I think they may all be contained within the playbook, but there's no sort of single place to handle that. You have these player aids, which are the equivalent to the cards for the power map cards for Here I Stand. They have more information and are more complicated. This is a slightly more complicated game than it. Honestly, I don't feel like it plays as complicated as Virgin Queen does, though. So, it's much closer to the Here I Stand level in terms of what you have to do. And actually, basically, each power has its own special ability, or at least one. So for the Russians, they have to deal with the Cossacks. They also have on the player board, on the actual play board that everybody shares, the map. Got to come up with a word for it somewhere. They have the exploration of Siberia on there as well, and then they have special rules to handle all that. They also, oh shit, got a tobacco stain. Oh well, it adds to the graininess here. Yeah, one of my fingers is stained. It's done some damage just now. These are functional. The game has a larger footprint because of the large mats, whatever. One thing that really kind of got me excited was actually that there wasn't errata to begin with. I don't know why, but somehow the idea that, sure, we kind of rushed it out the door, but we caught these things beforehand, feels like, oh, that's cool, And they also gave some errata counters, replacement counters for the ones in the game, which that one really kind of impressed me. I don't think I've seen a game that was published that came with the replacement counters already in it, boxed up in it and everything. So that was kind of a weird thing, but again, it led me to think, oh, this is a much more professional, operation. The quality of the pieces and everything added to that. You got a playbook that has the various scenarios in it. Nothing else. No detailed play example or anything like that. It does give some strategy hints. I don't know too much about that. There's really, though, only one scenario in the game, the campaign. Everything else is meant, to be able to play a single turn, basically. And I don't think there's a two-turn scenario. They're all marked as introductory scenarios that aren't the first one. No, there is a two-turn one. The Demetrians is 2 turns, so... and they give you something that would be a much shorter glimpse into the play of the game. But think about playing 1 turn or 2 turns of Here I Stand. You're losing so much of the flavor and the overall strategy that you set up and everything, and the dynamism of setting up alliances and whatnot, that I really don't think that they are very good as standalones. They really are introductory scenarios meant to bring the game, in a smaller time frame to teach people it. And then if it's going to be, like I said earlier, it's probably going to take you 12 hours to play the main game, I would guess. I think it's about twice as long as Here I Stand. So, maybe with a more reasonable group, we're talking 8. But with all the rules lookups and everything, I don't think so. At least not for a long time. And then the rulebook. And the rulebook is the one component that I have a huge problem with. although the stiff cards are annoying because you have to reshuffle a lot in this game. Basically, you have to shuffle your decks once a turn for the most part, if people have funds to spend to dig through their deck and see if they want one of the cards. So they say here 7 game turns can be finished in 6 or 7 hours. Yeah, maybe if you completely are familiar with the game and have resolved all the issues. But the real problem here is that the rulebook is not good. There's grammatical issues in it that have to do with translation, and those can kind of just bring a smile to my face. But there's a lot of ambiguity, there's a couple of contradictions, and there's really a significant amount of places where there's holes in them. And the way that they're organized is very frustrating. Just the whole numbering organization that was used in them is very problematic. In addition, before I start sort of paging through the rules and giving maybe a little bit more detail if I'm going to go there, in addition, I found in the actual play of the game. So the game has a fair number of reaction cards in the decks. I find reaction cards to be a burden even when playing opposed, in the sense that they're very easy to forget. So very interactive play is already, already kind of challenging, especially solo. But in terms of it generates situations by somebody doing something you didn't expect that create an analysis paralysis, and or create new circumstances where you have to rethink what your plans are after everybody's turn or whatever. Anybody that you're interested in. So it's one of the things with CDGs is that you're already kind of extending the play from what might be a very quick and easy play for people who are really, really down pat on what they want to do, to having to rethink your strategy regularly based on what other people have done. You may also have to page through the rules to find out, because there are a lot of chromey instances in the rules, in the game itself. Like I said, each country has its own couple special tracks or whatever to manage. Those all have their own special rules to it. Almost all of the minor countries that are in the game have special rules associated with them. Trying to think what else. There are additional special rules like units that you have to remove at the end of the turn and everything that aren't well designated. There's no real mnemonic device in the regular components to help remind you that, you got to pull these off each turn. So you basically have to keep a lot of these special rules juggled around in your head at all times. Now, again, if you're playing with a bunch of people who have, in that sort of tournament style play that I've seen Here I Stand played in, where everybody knows the game pretty well, and you don't have to worry about somebody sort of running the game and trying to keep everybody else's ducks in order as well as their own, that works fine. Unfortunately, the rule set is so problematic that I think it would be very, very difficult to get a group, unless it's a single group that plays together all the time, right? To get a group, say, at a convention or something, that would agree on the interpretation of the rules. They're just too fuzzy, and there's too many questions in play. Now, the designer's beginning to come out with errata, but errata is not sufficient for this. This is something that really requires a whole rules rewrite. In particular, and you can go through the playthrough to see my frustrations and direct examples that I had. I'm not going to call all those out, or even any of them really. But one thing in particular that may be a rules misunderstanding, but goes beyond that. Another sign of the development doesn't look like it was completed on it. It really does appear that there's a strong possibility of a turn 1 or turn 2 win by one of a couple of powers. I would actually say 3 of the powers have a shot at it. I didn't talk much about the Ottomans because we didn't see that, but I think they actually have a shot at it as well. Now, 2 of the players who might be in that position, the Austrians and the Ottomans, there's not a lot other players can do about it if they get a lucky break in their favor early on. The third one's the Poles, and the things that would have to be done to prevent the likelihood of a Polish early victory in the first couple turns of the game, one that would be completely ahistorical in and of itself with what it would imply, are very ahistorical themselves. There are things that, and you can look at my wrap, I go into this in detail there on the last video. But there are things that are just, not believable. And sure, I've only played it once. I may have played it wrong. Well, I certainly played it wrong, but I may have missed something major in play there. But if I didn't, and I don't think I did, I've put a lot of effort into trying to track things down and figure things out without going to the designer, every 5 minutes while I'm playing to ask a question, because the questions really were rolling that fast. Every time I look at a hand of cards, I had another question come up. Sometimes fairly minor ones, but yeah. This kind of, and I'm going to call it an unbalanced situation, although it's possible that the players could balance it themselves by their knowledge of the game in conjunction with, actions that they can take in the game that they're legally able to take, which balances it. Then you end up in a situation where people are doing very, very ahistorical things. And that, to me, doesn't suit a game that's based in history like this. Those are my main complaints. All that said, I actually like the game. That may not come across as obvious. I didn't take any enjoyment in playing it. Don't get me wrong there. It was too frustrating. But I see this and I say, oh boy, man, I really would want to play this again if I had anywhere near the time. My backlog is just too big to give things, especially now when something that's not that long takes as many weeks as this did. All right. Yeah, there's too many issues for me to kind of go through this and point them out. So I'm going to leave it at that for the most part. But yeah, there's just many places where I'm left with as many questions as I am with understanding in terms of what was intended. And in some cases you're going to have to not rigorously not try to read the rules literally, but try to interpret what was meant in them. But then also the way the format is set up and everything, it makes it very hard to find the things. So you've got a question about something, a rule's in place, but it's difficult to actually locate it just because of the layout and the numbering system. Overall, this is a game that just did not get enough development time. I'm pretty damn convinced of that. And it's a sad factor because, I don't know how many games this company has put out, but you always kind of want to wow people the first time. right? Um, you don't want to put out a product that you think, that people who actually buy it are going to say, huh, yeah, but now I don't really trust you as being able to, develop a fully functional game. Of course, then there's idiots like me who, I became an Azure Wish Editions AWE addict, and almost all of their games are problematic. The ones that hooked me and that I probably like the most are in about as bad a shape as this. You can make your quibbles, but they are also, well, La Révolution Française is a good example compared to this, which is, not a huge amount of rules, but just so much in it that you're left with so many questions. And I could see this hooking me the way that did, in terms of, because I'm trying to figure out how to make the game work. In the end, though, I suspect that, like La Révolution Française, this is actually, just a flawed, underdeveloped game. It's not just that the rules aren't clear what you're supposed to see with it. It's not just a matter that you need to play it a few more times to start playing it correctly to get reasonably historical results. I really suspect that this is just, it was a matter of, well, we were planning on publishing it, and maybe we could take a delay of a couple of months or something, but not one where you redevelop the whole damn game. But yeah, it really feels like something that was rolled out the door well before it was supposed to be. Which is a pity. It is a pity, because, yeah. I mean, Here I Stand is a great, plays so well. But it plays as a tournament-style game. It plays as a game where if everybody knows the rules and is familiar with the game, they can sit down and just, smash out a really exciting competitive game. But it can also be played as sort of a browsing game where nobody really knows the rules, but somebody teaches them the rules that day, but nobody's really familiar with the cards and whatnot. And so they're making kind of bad decisions, but the game still flows out okay. With this, you find yourself, I think, a little bit more, in positions where you're like, oh, I had to really carefully engineer the 30 Years' War, a la Paths of Glory has some card sets like that, where you have to know the card deck very well. On the bright side, though, there are rules in this that make it fairly likely you'll be pawing through your cards often. So you might actually make those connections and realize that you have to do that ahead of time. There's almost a book to the opening turn in terms of the cards, because you're allowed to pay for cards, or at the first turn of the game, take cards right off the beginning that you pick out of the deck and put in your hand. And there's almost an opening book as to what you want. And some of the cards are very limited as to when they can be played. So some of them, and this is the problem with the 30 Years' War, is not only do you need the 30 Years' War card on one of two specific turns, but you need to have played another card before you can play the 30 Years' War. How big a deal is that? Well, once you've played it once or twice, at least as the Austrians, you know that. The other thing is, I'm not sure the 30 Years' War, it certainly didn't look appealing to me as the Austrians to start. Given that they won the game without it, it wasn't, because it's a long game type of situation. That is one interesting thing to it. So you have these auto victories, and they are well within reach. This is a here I stand type thing. And they're not evenly distributed. Like certain powers are capable of doing them early in the game. Other powers may be able to do them later in the game. But then there's collecting up your victory points, which associate with your automatic victory. And there's actually a second automatic victory, which is if you get enough victory points, it's just over. But yeah, you have to make a decision which path you're going to follow, especially with those nations that can make an early victory. So Austria was an example where the play that I made was actually, without really making that decision properly, but was actually aimed towards that early victory. And it made it very, very clear that, trying to play something out to go for victory points when I'm competing for victory points with everyone else just wasn't as efficient or as likely to win me the game. Anyway, it is, it is a pity that that the rule book is in the shape that it's in. Everything else, well, and that if I'm right, that the play is going to be so skewed towards either an early victory for one of a few players, or very ahistorical play to stop that in the case of Poland. All right, up it goes.